bringing Gator Nation a different Gator great every episode.
This is Gerard Gaffney. You're listening to the All for the Gators podcast.
Hey, I'm Earl Everett. You're not a Gator, you're Gator bait.
This is Bo Carroll.
Hey, I'm Rita Anthony.
This is Kewan Ratliff, and you are listening to All for the Gators podcast.
This is Cedric Faison, a.k.a. C4.
This is Brandon James.
This is Jack Jackson. Go Gators.
Hi, this is your boy Jeremy Mincy, a.k.a. Mr. Mintz, and we were the All for the Gators podcast.
This is Ben Trooper. You listening to the All for the Gators podcast.
Hey, guys, this is Jarvis Moss. Go Gators.
You rocking with Lito Shepherd, and we're All for the Gators podcast, man. Top notch.
This is Chris Doring, and you're listening to the All for the Gators podcast.
And now, your Gator alumni hosts, John, Andy, and Sid.
We're back and we're doing it live. Well, I guess it's not really live. It's a podcast.
Live without a net. I like that style.
Yeah, we're not broadcasting on YouTube yet. We haven't hit that plateau.
Oh, we could always dream. Maybe next show.
I don't think we're that smart yet.
I'm definitely not.
But we are back. It's the All for the Gators podcast. Allforthegatorspodcast.com. 4 is the number 4. You can see all the shows we've done in the past. Our last episode, of course, featuring the old ball coach. Guys, I still haven't gotten over that.
Greatest Gator ever.
That was a doozy. That was a good one.
Yeah, so if you haven't heard it, you got to go check it out on the website. And we've taken a little bit of a hiatus here, but we're back. And we're scheduling shows furiously. I mean, I got texts coming in confirming. You want to hear it?
I want to hear it.
Hit me.
Here we go. 15 minutes ago, Taylor Jacobs.
Ooh, last 1,000-yard receiver in Gainesville.
Nice.
That's right. We are going to record with him on next Friday.
Excellent.
So,
sadly, that's about the most exciting plans I've had on Friday night in a minute there. So this is good stuff. Excellent.
Well, fellas, it has been a minute. And, of course, the Super Bowl, right, happened.
Oh.
Eagles obliterated the Chiefs.
Not a very fun Super Bowl. No, unless you're like an Eagles fan, that was not a really fun Sunday.
Well, in any case, we always congratulate our Gator brothers that are out there on the field earning Super Bowl jewelry, if you will. And there were 2 on the Eagles.
Very nice.
Do you know who they were?
Well, I know the heart of their defense, Mr. Gardner Johnson, definitely earned his ring.
Absolutely.
That's right.
And Fred Johnson, offensive lineman for the Eagles, winning Super Bowl rings representing Gator Nation.
Couple of Johnsons.
Very nice.
Yeah, so we're back. We're in full force. It's the All for the Gators podcast, and today's show is going to be no different, fellas.
Oh, yeah? Well, who do we got today?
Well, gentlemen, today's Gator Great came out of our own backyard in Gainesville. We're at GHS. He was All-State, All-American on the D-line, and also the starting center on their 99 state championship basketball team. By graduation, not only was he touted as one of the top D-linemen in the nation, fellas, but I believe we have a first on the show for this one. He was valedictorian of his class.
Wow.
Well, Coach Spurrier wouldn't let this monster homegrown scholar athlete get away, keeping him in the swamp. And as a Gator, he would terrorize quarterbacks, plugging gaps in the trenches, and helping anchor the number 1 defense in the SEC. He'd go on to play for the Bears and Chargers in the NFL, even started Super Bowl 41. Today, he still impacts football in Gainesville. Ladies and gentlemen, I give to you 2-time academic all-district selection, SEC academic honor roll honoree, 2-time all-SEC and SEC champion, your GHS Hurricanes head coach, Ian Scott.
All right.
Hey, that's quite the introduction.
Thanks for joining us.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, Coach, thank you so much for taking the time for us today.
Oh, no problem. Anytime.
So you were born in South Carolina, but you grew up in Gainesville. And in doing research for this show, I found an article online that listed the best Gator players ever that came out of Gainesville. And, of course, you were on the list. So let me ask you, who's on your Mount Rushmore of Gator football players that came out of Gainesville?
Coming out hot out of the gate. Tough question.
Right out of the gate, man.
I don't know if I'm old enough to answer that question. Maybe a bit of recency bias with my best friend growing up was Gerald Fields. So I'm a big fan of his dad, Wayne. One of my favorite people. So a big fan of Wayne and Vernell Brown as well. Those are kind of just personal favorites of mine. But you got the PK Young guys, Willie Jackson and Chris Doring, 2 really great receivers.
Friends of the show.
And obviously Chris and Terry were part of the national championship team. And guys that I'm still, I'm close with to this day. So those are kind of my personal favorites. That guys that I'm close with, but there's quite a few when I was that just a little bit older than me, and unfortunately trickled off a little bit here over the years since.
That's okay. It's your Mount Rushmore. Put whoever you want on.
We got a couple new additions on the team this year, so they're I guess last year, but on the team now. So we'll see how they do. Maybe they're on a future Mount Rushmore.
Yeah.
So let's go back to your days where the gridiron started back at Gainesville High. Football, baseball. John mentioned the state championship you won in basketball, but tell us a little bit about your father's impact on your young football career that we understand kind of started back in like the 9th grade for you.
Yeah, my dad, when I was little growing up, he started out, coaching youth football, Pop Warner around here back in the day. So I grew up going to all the games with him. I was too big to play. When I was 8 years old, I would have had to play with like the 14-year-olds. So I didn't I didn't play. I played baseball with those same guys and played soccer mainly growing up, those two sports. So, I used to, Saturdays would be full of youth football when I was a kid. My younger brothers played. So, my dad would coach, and then my younger brothers played with their team. So we, spend like all day at the football field when we were younger. And then as we started to get older, my dad started to coach at the high school. And so I started out as a ball boy, and got to be a part of the team when I got there to high school for the first time, which was very interesting. Eye opener, being a bigger kid for my age and playing varsity football as a freshman was a bit of a culture shock for me. And then once I got comfortable and kind of learned how to play, it was a lot of fun. My dad being a defensive coordinator, my experience is a little different than a lot of people where, Friday nights, a lot of guys will go and do whatever after the game and hang out. I went straight back home and watched the game film. And then my dad went and exchanged film. He was the film exchange guy. So we'd watch a couple games on Saturday before he had the coaches meeting on Sunday. So I kind of already knew what the game plan was before we even got to school again on Monday. But that's kind of how my experience went all throughout high school, and watching a lot of college football as well. And he quizzed me on situations and all this type of stuff. And we watched NFL games, and he'd ask, if I knew where these guys went to college, and kind of give me history lessons on people that I would see on TV. So I learned how to watch football from an analytical standpoint very young as well.
I love those stories of you watching the games with your dad. Clearly, truly a student of the game, and you weren't just limiting your student skills to the game. Very impressive. You mentioned all those sports and valedictorian. Wow, I can't even say it. And obviously, it's been a long time. But do you remember what your speech was about? What was that like? To have all eyes on you for something. Obviously, center of attention for your athletic prowess, but it must be nice to be acknowledged for your academics as well.
I do remember what my speech was about. My mom actually put a copy of it. She made a scrapbook for me when I graduated high school. It's actually in there. I can remember vividly seeing a talk show that talked about the new rise of the KKK, and being a mixed person and having experienced some, not so pleasant memories growing up of being treated differently because of the color of my skin. My speech was actually about how us as a generation had an opportunity to be different, and to show more love for different types of people in different places. So it took a little bit more serious tone than I think your normal valedictorian or graduation speech, but that was kind of the genesis of what I ended up speaking about at my graduation.
I love it. Still relevant now. That's great.
Absolutely. Well, by the time you graduate, you're one of the nation's top prep D linemen. Michigan, FSU, even some guy named Urban Meyer comes knocking for Notre Dame. So Was going to UF a slam dunk, and who recruited you from there?
So the first part, no. Going to UF wasn't a slam dunk. My dream actually had always been to go to Clemson, which is where my parents went to school. My dad's a Hall of Fame linebacker there.
Okay.
And he wore number 35, and Frank Thomas was one of my favorite baseball players at the time. And he played,
Big Hurt.
I remember watching him in the College World Series, like
Sure.
bust baseballs through the scoreboard, wearing number 35.
Yep.
So, and I knew he played football.
At Auburn, right?
Yeah, at Auburn.
Yeah.
And so I was like, man, I can go to Clemson and I can play football and I can play baseball and I can wear my dad's number 35. And so that kind of was the dream all along. I never knew if it was going to be possible. And, just my dad always told me when I was looking at, places to go that I was the one that was going to have to live there. And I had to make sure that I was in a place with people that I felt a connection with and could be a place that I could call home for 4 or 5 years. And so, through the process, there was a couple different options there. It ended up coming down to, Michigan and Florida. Bob Sanders was newly recruiting the area. I think whoever was doing it prior to him flubbed the Clinton Portis deal by telling him that he was going to be a safety and not a running back. So I think they made a little change, and Coach Sanders I had known for a while because I went to high school with his daughter, who was a year older than me in school. So we had already had a relationship, and him and Coach Broadway uh, got to know them pretty well, but they were both gone after my freshman year. So, it's never ending landscape. It's an always changing landscape in college football. But the thing that struck me the most was while I was on my visit, Spurrier, I got to meet with him. But they played. Took all mine during the season, and we played Florida State that night, and it was a game, that '99 game, where we had some big penalties that called touchdowns back. I don't know if you guys remember that far back, or
Sure.
the audience will.
That was our time.
But that game was in the swamp. Yeah, and I was actually on the Brock Berlin was in that weekend as well, and we're sitting down to dinner, and Spurrier comes in, and he says, I got guys here, and I know I'm supposed to be smiling and happy and all that type of stuff. He said, but I feel like we let a game that we had a chance to win slip through our fingers, so I'm probably not going to be the most pleasant company tonight. And he just kind of sat down and didn't really talk to anybody. And to me, I'm a super competitive person. That just kind of struck me as, he was telling the truth, and he was honest, and he was a competitor, and that was the type of person that I could see myself being a part of. And
Let me ask you a question. Was that dinner with Brock Berlin happen to be at the Outback?
no, it was actually in the stadium.
Oh, okay.
Because it was after the game.
John used to stalk you players. He thought he
No,
clocked you there at the Outback.
I saw Brock Berlin at the Outback one time. Around that same time, because we're all at UF there at the same time together,
I got you.
So
You mentioned how you were impressed with what a competitor Coach Spurrier was. Well, speaking of competition, you come in as a freshman into a stacked D-line. You got team captain and future Super Bowl teammate of yours, Alex Brown. You got top draft pick, big money Gerard Warren in there. What can you tell us it was like walking into a room with such talent on the defensive line, and what sort of influence did those guys have on you to your later success here with UF?
You know what? I think the really good thing for me being local was the end of my senior year. After I had signed, I was able to, at the time, I go over after school and I would sit in the D line room and I'd watch film with the D line and go out to practice in the spring and watch them practice. So, well before I even got on campus, I kind of knew all those guys and they were used to having me around. So it wasn't like I was, a totally brand new guy on campus. I wasn't like Brock that was there in school and doing everything with them, but I got to see kind of how they worked and how they operated. And, those guys were great. I don't think I've been able to be the player that I was without having the experience and the role models to look up to that those guys were, the way that they prepared, way that they worked, just the intensity that they played with and practice with was, something that I got to see firsthand. And you want to uphold that standard when you come in the room, and you want to be a part of that. And you don't want to let those guys down. So that was a huge part of me being able to play early and also be able to be successful when, Gerard and Derek and Buck left after my freshman year, and everybody's like, "Well, who's going to play defensive tackle?" That gave me an opportunity to step in and, try to do the best I could. You're never going to replace all of all that experience and fill those shoes, but I think we were able to do some good things with that 2001 team for sure.
Well, let's talk about 2000 real quick. That was a great year for the Gators, SEC champs. And as a true freshman, you played behind Warren. You also battled an ankle injury that year, but you do get into 8 games. What would you say was the toughest part of transitioning from high school to not just the college game, but playing in a conference like the SEC?
The biggest change is just how much faster things happen. I told one of my players this the other day. When you jump from high school to college, there's the adjustment in the speed of how the game goes. Same thing when you go from college to the NFL. So, you know, going from high school and the things that I learned, and the biggest thing, and it's kind of everybody does it now, but it wasn't as big back then, was just learning how to play with my hands while keeping my pads down. That was kind of one of the biggest adjustments that I had to make, and it sounds simple, but at the time I just used to fire off and try to keep my pads low, and because I was bigger than everybody else, you can kind of run over people and do those types of things in high school, but that don't work in the SEC. If you can't play with your hands and learn how to be able to defeat blocks and keep your pad level low at the same time, you have a hard time. And so that was the biggest lesson that I had to learn and get comfortable with. And once I gained some confidence in learning the techniques that I was being taught, I was able to take off from there.
Mentioned 2001. That's the enigma season. We've spoken to so many of your teammates. Even Coach Spurrier came on the show. We talked to him about it. How do you look back on that year?
It's it's bittersweet, I guess, is the best way to describe it. I played a lot of football, and I had you know some really good games, and made some good plays. We had some phenomenal games as a team, but we had two games that we lost by a total of 5 points, that
Tennessee.
kept us out of playing for the SEC championship and potentially being able to play for the national championship in the Rose Bowl against Miami, which would have been a great story after having played them in the Sugar Bowl the year
I
before.
was at that game.
So it's one of the things that we had a expectation of where we could possibly end up, and it just didn't work out that way. And it's been great being able to work with Ernest Graham here this past year, him being my offensive coordinator. Said, man, the 2 games you didn't play and you weren't available, we lost. Like, what's going on,
Yeah,
man? Like,
he told us about that.
you
Yeah.
couldn't have sucked it. You couldn't have sucked it up for 2 weeks. Like, come on, man. Like, help us out.
Well, you definitely had an amazing season. I mean, you get to start 10 out of the 11 games. You lead all defensive tackles with 49. That's a lot for a tackle. 12 forced quarterback hurries, 2.5 sacks. I mean, all SEC honors for the first time. You were a huge part of what could have been a historic season for the Gators. To what do you attribute your personal success on the field that year, or where you took that big leap?
Again, this kind of goes back to your previous question. You got to go back to the off season, and we're lifting during the real heavy phase where we're getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning running and lifting for 2 hours sometime during the day after that, stuff they can't do these days. And I had like something wrong with my back. They found out that my pelvis was rotated and one of my legs was shorter than the other, so it was putting a lot of strain on my back. So I was going through all this rehab and stuff, and Alex was out at workouts one morning, and Alex Brown turns to me in the middle of a drill and says, "Hey, man, we're all counting on you to step up and play. You need to get off the fence and get out here and be healthy again and, help us out. And I tell my younger guys, I was like, as a player, you can respond to that in one or two ways. You can get mad and be like, hey, man, like, I'm hurt. Why are you bothering me? But that's not why he was saying that to me. He was letting me know that, hey, look, you are an important part of what we're doing, and we're not going to be the best that we can unless you figure it out. And we have, you're 100%. And like I said before, you don't want to let your brothers down. You don't want to let the guys in the room that you're battling with, you don't want to drop the rope and let them down. And I just had such a, strong feeling that, look, these guys are counting on me and I got to be the best that I can be. And that, you know, really inspired me to that I had a place with the Gators. I had a place on that team where I could contribute and be counted on, and being able to be out there on the field with Alex and Andre Davis and Marquand and Lito and all those guys, being a part of that team and being one with those guys on the defensive side of the ball was special. And I wanted to make sure that I was not the reason that they didn't enjoy the success that they expected, and that I got to can be not only be out there but really contribute.
So you talked about lifting with those guys. I mean, there's a lot of big humans in that room. Who's lifting the most?
That was me. After Gerard and Derek left, nobody in the history of weightlifting lifts more than Derek, other than maybe Larry Allen. I've heard some crazy stories about Larry, but Derek Chambers, can lift the whole weight room. They hadn't made they hadn't made a bar big enough to hold all the weights that he can bench and squat. So again, everything you were doing is you're competing, and everybody had different things that they were good at. I was not a great power clean guy just because I have a much longer torso than I do lower body, which is unusual. But like Brian Savaleo came in and he had been coached by like an Olympic power lifter, and his technique was perfect, and like he could power clean anything. And I used to be so jealous. Like, man, how you do all that stuff? And can I get, a little bit of that? But, I had other areas where I did pretty good in. So, but again, just competition. One of my favorite things is we had a club. Every position you had a certain amount of weight total that you had to get for bench, squat, and power clean. And I have my Iron Gator shirt. It's in my bag that I keep from special memories. I mean, you got to go through some stuff to earn one of them T-shirts, and I'm proud that I actually got one.
Nice. All right, so 2001, big year. You emerge as a playmaker. You get the motivation from AB, but then the old ball coach jumps to the NFL. Zook is in as head coach. How did that change affect you personally?
That's probably not one of my favorite memories. I was so looking forward to that next year, the junior year. And Ricky Hundley, who was the D-line coach at the time, before we played the Orange Bowl, we're out there stretching and stuff, and he comes up to me, which he didn't normally do, and I thought was a little unusual. But looking back on it, he must have known something that I didn't. But he was like, "Hey, this is going to be your team next year." He's like, "Don't let anybody take that away from you." And I was like, that's an odd thing to say before the Orange Bowl. So we played a game, and the next morning I get a call from my aunt, telling me that, Spurrier had left. I was like, what are you talking about? Like,
wow.
I was like, that's crazy. And then I turn on ESPN, and sure enough, it's, streaming there on the bottom. So, long story short, that change was, it was quite different. The, me being an engineering program, there are some conflicts there that, with Spurrier, we were able to manage, and was a little bit more difficult, with the new staff. I can empathize with, guys that are in the transfer portal sometimes because, I might have, made a different decision had that been something that was available to me at the time. Just because as much as people say that you go to a school, the people that are involved are very important because you're still developing as a young person, trying to figure out what kind of adult you're going to be, and the adults around you kind of have a big part of that and are key to that. And for me to have to, that was had three defensive line coaches in 3 years, two defensive coordinators, two head coaches. That's a lot of change in a short period of time.
Sure.
When you come from high school where you got I knew the same three coaches since I
You lived
was,
with your DC from high school.
yeah,
No
I
escape.
lived, I lived with the DC, but being the ball boy for 2 years before I got to high school, I knew the offensive coordinator and the head coach as well. And, I spent probably as much time with them as anybody else. So to go from that level of stability and then get to college and have a whole bunch of change, that was a bit, it was a great learning experience for me because I think it's helped me to be able to communicate to my players, you know, how that, how that can happen for them.
Well, as a fellow engineering major, I don't know how the hell you played football and did engineering, because I don't know how I got through it, and that was.
Well,
but that's a different story.
That was part of my decision to leave was the big part of that because I probably was going to have to change majors.
Anyway, so Gators had a tough time transitioning, kind of the post-Spurrier era, especially that year, right? Dropped 5 games. Not what Gator Nation was used to. But what was the vibe in the locker room that year with the change? And then kind of a next part of that question, why do you think Zook wasn't able to sustain, Spurrier's level of success? You guys had a great team.
If you look back on that season, we probably the Ole Miss game, right? We go to Ole Miss and I mean they had less than 200 yards of total offense for the whole game. I think I went back and looked at it one time. I think they were like 2 for 15 on third downs, and we lost that game 17-14 somehow. If we win that game, we get to play for the SEC championship because we beat Georgia. We won all the games in the SEC East. We lost to Ole Miss and we lost to LSU. A bit of Nick Saban revenge there, which was the game that just kind of spiraled out of hand, kind of there in the middle. But other than that, we were right there. Had an opportunity to win several of those games that we lost. I think, LSU being the one game that just kind of got out of hand. Even the Miami game that we lost early, we were down 8 at the end of the third quarter, going at the 2-yard line, and Sean Taylor had that, fantastic pick six for 106 yards that kind of set the game down. It wasn't like we were very far off from, having a very similar record to the one we had before. Things they just didn't quite click, and that kind of happens sometimes. You're a handful of plays away, and, it can happen with a brand new coaching staff at times. And one thing that Ron Zook was phenomenal at was recruiting.
Yep.
It's not like we didn't have good players and continue to have good players. We just, the results on the field just didn't quite click. And probably anybody taking over for Spurrier at that time, I don't know that anybody would have been able to last for, a whole lot longer. Like
It was a tough act to
that was
follow.
almost an impossible ask,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, he talked about that too when he came on our show.
Yeah, I kind of worry about that with Alabama right now because for them to be grumbling about him,
Don't worry too much about
already
Alabama,
was-
but that's okay.
well, being on the coaching side now, you kind of feel for guys when they lose jobs. Although if somebody wanted to pay me that much dollars to not work, I don't know that I would complain too much.
Oh, well, sticking with that season, you fight through a torn meniscus in your knee, play through it. You get it cleaned up after November and only missed 1 game, but your production doesn't suffer at all. You start all 12 games that you played, put up 57 tackles, another 8 forced QB hurries, and once again, voted all SEC. Did you know, it sounds like you were a little frustrated about Coach leaving. Did you already have in your mind that you were done at the end of the year? How close were you to coming back for one more run?
I think that you never know what can happen, right? Like I think if Spurrier had been there, it might have been a different story.
Well, Ian, can I ask you, did Coach Spurrier, did he know your father? You know, everybody being in Gainesville. Why wouldn't Zook keep the same program that Spurrier was letting you work? Why was he being a stickler?
So, at least for my study of engineering, I had a lot of afternoon classes, for whatever reason, didn't match up philosophically. So, faced with all the work that I had put in to get that degree and having to give that up and go do something that I was less interested in, or taking a chance to go play professional football and, having the opportunity for them to continue to pay for me to get my education,
Mm-hmm.
that was a big part of my decision.
All right, so let's talk about week 3 that season. Ohio, big game. You had a career high 13 tackles. You get named UF's Defensive Player of the Week. Were you just feeling good that day? How does that game stand out in your memories?
It's funny you asked about that because I was actually thinking about that recently. It popped up in my memory. One of the big stories after the game, obviously because we had just lost to Miami and didn't, perform as well as we should have stopping the run. That Ohio team ran for like 160 yards or something like that, and that was one of the big questions after the game. And they asked me about it in an interview, and I was like, well, they did run the ball 62 times out of like 65 plays. I said, so if you do the math, that's less than 3 yards per carry. So, yeah, that sounds like a lot of yards, but I don't think it was too detrimental. And, the way that you display, numbers and figures sometimes in football to tell a story is interesting. But, when you play a team that's running a triple option like they were as a defensive tackle, you gotta do your job and gotta do your assignments. And so the biggest thing about that game was the rain. That was a game that got postponed a little bit because of the lightning, and we had to sit in the locker room for several minutes, or I don't remember how long it was, and then come back out, and the field was muddy, and I don't know that I've ever been so dirty in the game, except for the next week when we went to Tennessee and it rained hard, heavy again.
Well, that was a big game for you. Let's talk about that next week. You block a field goal against Tennessee. I'm sure that's a play that you remember from your time in Orange and Blue. What other plays stick with you when you look back?
Particularly from that game or just in general?
No, just in general. In general.
Um, that year again, Ole Miss, Coach Thompson used to have this defense where everybody was standing up. Nobody had their hand in the ground. So, I'm a defensive tackle standing up in a 2-point stance and, was able to make a play, get a tackle for loss. That was one of my plays that I remember. I kind of remember more of my teammate stuff. One of my early memories from being in the swamp is I think it was Middle Tennessee we were playing, and there's a fumble and Todd Johnson picks it up and goes and returns it for a touchdown. And I remember just this wave of sound. I've never heard anything so loud in my life as I'm running to the end zone, which used to be the student section down there. And I never heard anything so loud in my life. That was pretty cool. Kentucky game my freshman year, I got cracked back on, and in the middle of the play, Gerard Warren says, "Welcome to the SEC, rookie." I always remember that play. I also my freshman year, Moody catching a touchdown pass as offensive lineman. It got deflected, and he caught it and ran it into the end zone from like 5 yards out. That game that started out really bad. We were down. They blocked 2 punts, and we were down like 21-7 in the first quarter, and had to make a big comeback to win that game. But Big Moody scoring a touchdown was a great play, and I I just I remember those big moments. Especially for when my teammates made a play, something that was exciting. It was always so much fun being in the stands and everybody chanting out Lito's name anytime there was a punt because they thought he was going to take it back for a touchdown. That's one of the coolest things that I remember as well. Anytime Rex used to take off and run because he didn't do it very much was always a lot of fun. And I think probably two of the biggest plays I remember is when we were playing Kentucky my freshman year, and they kept. I don't remember the final score of that game, but there had to be 90 points scored, and they kept throwing the ball. They scored
Was
a
that big Jared
touchdown,
Lorenzen
and they're
with Kentucky at that time?
yeah,
The hefty lefty.
yep.
Yeah.
I think we were up by more than 2 scores, and they kicked the onside kick or whatever.
Yep.
Still trying to score, and we recovered it with like 10 seconds left. And Spurrier put Rex back in the game and called like a bomb, like play action, throw it down the middle, and we scored a touchdown with like no time on the clock, and we were already up 2 scores. I was like, wow, this is
That's
aggressive.
typical Florida Kentucky.
And
We
then,
had 29 in a row against them. You were right in the heart of that there.
and then we went up there the next year and almost the same play. I think on our first drive it was 4th and 1, and we went forward and Rex this play action, and Rex hid the ball behind his back, and I think it was Jabari hit running down the middle of the field, and you could hear the stadium deflate. That was
That happened a lot.
That was pretty cool.
I remember, and I want to say it was the year after. I want to say Clint Mitchell sacked Lorenzen, and he was like giving away like 70 pounds. He basically put his arms around them and laid back down and pulled them down. It was like it looked like someone trying to tackle their big brother or their father. It was kind of comical.
Yeah, that did happen.
Well, you wrap up your Gator career, you go on to the draft. So 2003 NFL draft. One, quite honestly, was not very good for me as a Packers fan. Watching the Bears draft Rex early, 3 rounds later, they take you and Todd Johnson, and then Tron Lefevre goes in the 5th. It's just not a good draft for a Gator fan watching everybody go to the rival Bears.
Yeah.
But anyway, was there a connection there between the Bears and the Gators? How'd that happen?
I think Jerry Angelo, from his time in Tampa, just liked guys from Florida. Some of these GMs, they kind of have a preference for kind of things that they like, I think, and for whatever reason, I think Jerry just, appreciated, the guys, work for Florida. I guess kind of the same type of relationship Belichick had with Urban when he came down.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
I think that was just a part of it, and Alex being there, and Alex had done a good job. So I think they felt comfortable with, that we would be able to handle, being up there and the move up there. And I got a picture on my wall in my office with all 5 of us from that first mini camp.
Awesome.
Pretty special time.
That has to help being like your first time away from home. I mean, you played at college where you went to high school, so this was your first time away from home, and you got so many friendly faces there welcoming you. And Chicago must have been a great time to be a young guy fresh out of college too. What do you remember about your transition? Was Alex big brother and hosting everybody and showing everybody around?
Yeah, a little bit. My earliest memory though is, it was 98 degrees here. The last weekend in April when I left to go up there for minicamp, and the high that weekend was 42.
Quick adjustment.
I was like, where am I at? And I had to go buy a jacket. And then, seeing Big Ted Williams for the first time. I mean, he might be the biggest person I've ever seen in my life. You go and you see these guys that their names on a TV screen, right? And you get to see them in person and meet them, and you meet the most interesting people in this thing, this football world. And, Ted and Keith Traylor and, all those guys, Philip Daniels.
Ooh, good line.
And, those guys were larger than life. And Brian Robinson, those were the 4. Those were kind of like their big wall. And Alex was a part of that. And, those guys become, lifelong friends and, people that you can count on. And that's pretty cool. And to be able to go and experience that with the guys that you're in, go to college with. Like, I mean, it's, those are memories that last a lifetime.
So you played in Chicago for 4 years, and the defense there was really the heart of the team.
Urlacher.
Yeah, Urlacher, Tillman, AB. And Ian put up some really good stats as well when he was playing with them. So what was it like playing on that level with those guys in the league? Were you pinching yourself at times, or?
When you're in the middle of it, it feels normal. It's weird. Like, I tell my wife all the time, I was like, at this point, it feels like it happened to somebody else. Uh, when you're in it though, like it's like, okay, this is my everyday. This is where I'm supposed to be. This is where I belong. And you work so hard and put so much time into not only being there, but staying there. And it takes up so much of your identity and stuff like that. And I think that's probably the most difficult part about when it's over is it takes up so much of, like I said, your identity and who you are, even when you try to understand that it's not who you are totally as a person, it's all consuming and it's kind of it's a different world, but to say that I got to play with Brian Urlacher and I go to work with him and Lance Briggs and Charles Tillman, Olin Kreutz, Reuben Brown, these guys are in the Hall of Fame, Thomas Jones, uh Musa Muhammad, like, these are people that when you talk to other people on that don't know who these people are, it's like, like they can't believe that knew who these people were and that you got to meet them. And, it seems like you kind of forget that it's not normal. It's not everybody's experience. And I want to make sure that I don't take that for granted. So we're cleaning out our garage and all these boxes and stuff that we've accumulated over the years and looking back over all these memories that are now on VHS tapes that don't work anymore and old Kodak camera film that you had to take to the grocery store to get developed. And like, what are we going to do with all this stuff now? we don't even have you don't even have devices to even operate it, but special memories for sure.
Big memory. Bears make it to Super Bowl 41 against the Colts.
Yeah.
You get the start at defensive tackle. What was that experience like? I mean, how did it feel running out of the tunnel there in Dolphin Stadium that night? And what else can you tell us about that game?
It's hard to describe that feeling. I mean, that's top 10, life memories, right?
Sure.
I've gotten married.
Absolutely.
I got 4 kids. Aside from that, there's not a whole lot of things that I've done that top, being able to play in the Super Bowl.
I'm glad you didn't say top 5 then.
Yeah. I'm careful. I'm careful. It's hard to describe the feeling of going out there and, understanding and knowing that everybody in the world is watching you. And this is it. This is for all the marbles, and you're getting an opportunity to do that. And there's some of the, greatest players in the history of our game that haven't even had an opportunity to be there. And just, that's huge. And to think, there's only been 59 of them now at this point. At that time there's 41. And, it was awesome. And in the back of your mind, you're thinking, okay, we're going to go and we're going to win this game and we're going to have a chance to get back. And there's never a thought in your mind that you'll never be back here.
Right.
That's these guys that have been to multiple and are going to them year in, year out, multiple in a few year span. I mean, that is special. And I hope they, cherish that and understand what a special time that is. But when you're in it, you don't really get it. It's not till you are done and you get to sit back and look at it and, realize what a moment that was. The weird thing though is, and maybe it's changed a little bit now because you see these guys talking to each other, but man, after the game, like they run you off the field if you're the loser. Like there ain't no shaking hands. The coaches get to go across and shake hands. Everybody else, I mean, they're roping off your sideline and running you right off the field to the locker room. So it's kind of a huge letdown when you don't win the game. Unfortunately, that game, I mean, it rained the whole time, which was a bummer. But Prince did the halftime show. My dad still talks about how he got to see Prince do Purple Rain in the Rain.
Very
Nice.
cool.
Yeah.
My wife though got laryngitis or pneumonia, something like that. she got really sick after the game. So that kind of dampened the memory a little bit as well. But I got to play in a Super Bowl, and it was not only did I get to play in a Super Bowl, but it was historically significant, being the first time that a black head coach won a Super Bowl, and it was guaranteed that day
Yep,
because
because
both
he
head
beat a black
coaches were
coach.
black.
Yeah, that's right.
Something had to give.
Right.
Yep.
Well, after you leave the Bears, you have brief stops in Philly and Carolina. You end your career with a couple years as a Charger. Brandon Seiler's there, and Florida fan favorite Billy Latsko is there as well. How was your
Yep.
time in San Diego, and why did you decide to hang him up?
San Diego was interesting because it actually was a lot of fun. I was having a lot of fun playing football again. Chicago, even though I did some great things, there was always this, it was always stressful because of the business side. I was trying to get a long-term contract. They kept drafting defensive tackles because Lovey felt like he could replace me. And, it was never really comfortable from the business aspect. And I knew at that point, by the time I got to San Diego, because of, my knee history, that every moment that I had was kind of borrowed time. So it was a lot of fun, with the guys. It was cool, you know, being there at Brandon and, Billy, especially, since Billy's from Gainesville as well. That was cool.
Weather was a
Again,
little better
really,
in San Diego than Chicago, right?
yeah, it's different though. It's not, it's more, I didn't realize there's no like green there. It's desert, mountain, and then ocean. Like
Oh, opposite of
there's not a
Florida.
lot of, yeah, there's not a lot of grass and trees, which was strange, but the weather is nice. Again, that ended my last game. That playoff game that we lost against the Jets was just like a real bitter taste in your mouth, kind of
Wasn't there a
like the
missed field goal?
2001
You
Gator
guys
season.
had a chance to
Three
win it late,
missed
and there was
field
a missed
goals.
field goal. Yeah, I
No, he missed
missed a
three
couple.
field goals.
Yeah, and the
Like I
Jets.
think he had missed one all season, and he missed three in that game.
I'm a long-suffering Jets fan. It's nice to hear some positive times because it's been like 20 years. So that's great. Thank you.
That kind of put the game away.
You finished your NFL career with 120 tackles, 23 for loss, 3 sacks, but you added an interception there too. Do you remember who it was off of, and you still got the ball?
I do have the ball.
Nice.
So we're playing Detroit. We had a scouting report on Joey Harrington, and I think, credit to Joey Harrington. He had got sacked so many times early in his career. He had a habit of trying to get rid of the ball really fast. And so the game plan was, you're not going to have a whole lot of time to get to him because he's going to try to get rid of the ball. So we were running a blitz. I'm crossing the center's face, and I can see Joey getting ready to throw the football. And this is back in the time where it wasn't cool to bat down passes. Now they celebrate these guys when they do it, but when I did it, it meant that I wasn't a pass rusher. So I think I had like 5 in this game, 4 or 5 batted passes. Well, this one just happened to sit on the shoulder pad of the center. Like I knocked the pass down and it sat right on his shoulder pad, and I just grabbed it off of his shoulder pad.
Nice.
I didn't, it was in a pile, so I didn't get to go very far. But that was my one interception.
Sweet. Well, that probably answers my question. I was going to ask you what your favorite piece of memorabilia is. That has to be up there. But also, I like to ask for someone who's had great success with the Gators, playing at the highest level, playing in the Super Bowl with the Bears. When you close your eyes and think back of your playing career, what helmet are you wearing? You got a Gator on there, or you got that ugly C?
It's Gators first, for sure.
Good answer. Good answer.
I appreciate that.
And I do like to see, but my actual favorite piece of memorabilia was our 3rd year in Chicago. Urlacher won the Defensive Player of the Year, and he got all the defensive linemen a nice framed jersey and this huge box. It's one of the things that I appreciate the most because it was his appreciation for the job that we did up front and helping him be successful. And that's kind of, just one of my favorite things that I have.
That's really awesome.
So now you're the head coach of the Gainesville High Hurricanes. What coaches really impacted you along your career? And do you find yourself taking like characteristics of their coaching styles and incorporating it into like how you coach today?
You take a little bit of all that stuff. The, the like I told you before, my high school head coach, my dad, the offensive coordinator, those three guys worked together for the better part of my childhood. From seventh grade to 12th grade, I was around those guys. So a lot of what I think about coaching comes from those three men. I have learned a lot being on the coaching side, just about kind of how to go through the process and how to teach guys. I spent a lot of time on the staff with Randy Shannon as the defensive coordinator. I learned a lot of, great lessons from him. And Jim McElwain gave me my first shot in college to come back to Florida and be a GA. He let me, he trusted me to come and be a D-line coach at Central Michigan for him for 2 years. And I've learned a lot about how to treat the players, organizing a practice, those different types of things, but in terms of the actual physical part of coaching, that's something that I believe you gotta be who you are. You gotta use your own personality to do that. When you try to be somebody else, I don't think it comes off as very genuine. And the players these days, they can see that and they feel that, and there's a much more, you know, personal connection now with the players than there was when I was playing. Like, coach was coach, and like we didn't really want to see coach or spend time with coach when we weren't, have to be at football practice. Like, you
Sure.
know, we saw we saw coach and like, man, I don't like you see coach, usually you're in trouble, right? Or you got
Right.
to do something that you don't really want
Principal's
to do,
office.
right? But now kids, even in college, like, man, they want to coach when we come into the house, like when we gonna go, let's go do paintball, let's go do this, that, and the other. Like we never would have asked our coach any of that type of stuff. So just that relationship piece is such a bit much more important part of who you are as a coach now. And you have to earn the trust of the players. There is no more positional authority in this thing. And the coaches that don't understand that don't last very long. So I have to be true to who I am. I got to be my own personality because then I can be authentic with our players. And you know, to me, that's the way you got to be. But in terms of organization and how to teach and all that type of stuff, yeah, I've learned a lot from some of the guys that have been around.
I got one last question before we wrap it up. Tying it back to the beginning. I'm still in awe of all the athletic prowess you had in high school, including being the center of that team. So let's talk hoops, because I am over giddy about Coach Golden and the number 2 Gator hoops team. So got to ask you, being there in Gainesville, have you been able to attend any of the games? Do you have any relationship with Coach Golden? And what do you like? What do you think of our chances going into the tournament here?
I don't have a relationship with the basketball staff there. I haven't actually been able to attend games. Man, you know, coaching the football team it's a year-round job, even in high school. So
Time
I
commitment.
spent a lot of my time trying to figure out how to be better so that our team can be better, so that our kids can have an opportunity to go to college like I did and, have a nice experience there. I also have my boys, excuse me, my youngest is in 8th grade and he's been playing middle school basketball here. So we've been, we go and do that. And my older son who plays for us on the football team, he's running track. So, kind of caught up into what they're doing. So that kind of take up most of my time. I have been able to see him on TV, and it's an exciting brand of basketball that they play.
It is.
You can kind of see that they take on the personality of their coach as well. He can get pretty fired up there on the sideline, and those guys do as well when they're playing on the basketball court. I'm amazed at the length that we have and the athleticism. It's something that we haven't had for a
And
while,
the
and
depth.
that he's been able to, yeah, he's been able to find all those pieces and get them to come together and play well together. Has been, it's a testament to to him as a coach, especially coming from the West Coast. I'm sure that wasn't very easy for him, but he's done a good job, and hopefully they can put it all together for a run in the tournament. You know, that usually comes down to matchups and who can get stops really when it comes to the NCAA tournament, and hopefully those guys can put it together because it'd be exciting to see them be able to have that and make that run.
Oh, yeah. All right, Coach. We usually end the show in a bit, and we're gonna do a you or trivia. Are you ready?
It's my favorite.
Okay.
So this is where I give you a stat, and you got to tell me who had a bigger number or better stat, you or whoever I say.
Okay.
Here we go. Who had more tackles for their career at UF, you or Gator Great All-American Sharif Floyd?
I think I did.
You did. You had 120. Sharif had 115.
Yeah, okay.
All right. Number 2, who had more tackles for loss in a single season at UF, you or Big Money Gerard Warren?
I'm going to say Big Money.
Right again. He had 20.
Yeah.
You had 18 and a half.
It's good at this game.
All right, here we go. Number 3. Who had more tackles in a single season at UF, you or national champ Ray McDonald?
Oh, man, my man Ray. Did he have? I'm going to say I did.
You did. You had 57 tackles in 02. Ray had 36 in 06.
Wow.
All right, last one. Here we go. Who had more tackles in Super Bowl 41, you or Alex Brown?
Oh, that's a hard one. I think I did.
You did. You had 4. AB had 2.
4 for 4.
Good job.
That's sweet.
Wow. He's the best player at this game ever.
Valedictorian for a reason.
We see it. Student of the game.
Coach Ian Scott, thank you so much for joining the show and taking the time to do this for us and Gator Nation, man. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure, and thank you for sharing your stories with us.
Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, well worth it.
I appreciate it.
Good luck next season, Coach.
Thank you, guys.
That's what you get with the engineers. You get a show like that. That was awesome.
That's true. That was definitely like a higher level of conversation. Did something about you, engineers? Yes, very impressive.
They were good. He outwitted the reporter. That was a great story about the rushing 62 out of 65 plays, only 3 yards a carry. Loved it. Loved it.
Right.
Yes. Well, is that your 2 bits?
No, I have something else for my 2 bits.
Oh, way to hog all the highlights. Okay,
I wanted to throw it in there.
Oh, you should go last now since you already took the low-hanging fruit.
Fine. All right, let's do our 2 bits.
All right, well, Andy, why don't you go first since we did get to do some bear jabbing, so this feels like you should lead this off.
All right, I'll take it. I was actually surprised at the story with the transition from Coach Spurrier to Coach Zook when it came to school. Speaking of engineering, right? The fact that Zook really wasn't working with him, for him getting to class and things like that. I would not have thought that. I know Zook came from the pros, so maybe it was that pro mindset that was there. But he was in college before, and Zook doesn't seem to me like the kind of guy that would. That really would have been like that. But I guess he was just under so much pressure coming in, to replace Spurrier. He just needed everybody there. But I was surprised to hear that Zook didn't work with Ian on getting what he needed to get done with school.
That's a real good point, because like everything we heard about Zook and his time with us, like there was criticism of some of the coaching, which might be fair, especially following Spurrier. That's tough, but really though, the relationships, the recruiting, the
player coach,
the player, like everybody said they loved him and run through a wall for him, and it seemed like if he was going to engender that sort of loyalty and fierce devotion, that he would be more of a player's coach for a student athlete. That that is interesting. Hopefully that's something that he cleaned up a little after that first season for the other Gators there, because that didn't sound like that was the brand of Coach Zook that we knew.
Yeah, right.
All right, Sid, you're up.
Good call, though. That's a good one, Andy. Like Coach Zook following Coach Spurrier, that's a tough one to follow. That was a good one, Andy. I actually really liked how it seemed like he had a network of Gators everywhere he went in the NFL. And, it's like a fraternity and stuff. And usually you got maybe one or two guys on the team, but it was a little ridiculous there. I mean, granted, the Gators were sending a lot of guys to the NFL, at the same time. Coach Spurrier had a whole bunch of Gator skins going on there too. But that was pretty cool, what was going on in Chicago. Sorry, Andy, we're talking Bears too much here, but that was pretty cool. Like a whole Gator family, some of them coming in with them as rookies, some of them already there. Nice to hear, and sticking with that, I think that's really awesome. Hall of Famer Brian Urlacher, when he won his Defensive Player of the Year, to give a specialized gift to the defensive linemen. Linebackers are able to do the things they do when the defensive line's able to occupy all the blockers to free them up. So sounds like he must have been a really great guy to do such a generous thing for his teammates. So my 2 bits is, of course, that was pretty cool hearing his Gator stuff, but I kind of appreciated his tales of the NFL and the experience and relationships he had there with some of those other pros. That was pretty cool.
Good one.
That was a rough draft for me. That was, for Rex. I mean, Rex goes, I was like, you got to be kidding me. And then 3 more Gators go in that draft. I was already pissed off that Rex went, and then 3 more guys. I remember that one. That was terrible.
All right. So mine is, it has to do with the saying, life is 10% what happens to you, 90% how you react to it, right?
That sounds like a Yogi Berra there. It's 120% mental.
No, it's somebody said it. It's a famous quote. Look it up.
I didn't know there was going to be math. Okay,
anyway,
continue.
It's when Alex Brown went up to him and he was healing after having some injuries and I think in the spring before his first big year starting. And he went up and gave him that motivation to, hey, we need you out here. So, Ian could have took that 2 ways, like he said. He could have, got upset and just said that he was hurt and used that as a crutch. Or he could use it as motivation to work hard and get healthy and get out there and bust his butt on the field and make the team better. And that's what he did. So I thought that was a very, very cool story to hear. That was the big one for me today.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was good.
I love to hear tales of camaraderies of great Gators and passing it down and stuff. That was a really nice example of that.
Yes, sir. And then they played in the Super Bowl together, so that really motivated them.
Pretty cool. Yeah, must be something to that.
All right, guys. All for the Gators podcast. Check us out online. allforthegatorspodcast.com. 4 is the number 4. Check out all our episodes. Check out who we have scheduled coming up, amongst other things that might pique your interest. So go to our website, listen, check us out anywhere you get your podcasts, and of course, subscribe to us wherever you can, wherever you want. If you don't, that's fine too. We'll still be here.
Yes, we will.
We'll still be here doing this.
Great show.
All right, guys, it's been a pleasure.
As always.
Go Gators.
Go Gators.
Go Gators.